Hello, audience. Welcome to my mini project for my Info 303 class. This project aims to help explore comics and how to better understand them. To move over to my first slide here, the reasons why I created this project. When picking projects for this class, there are definitely a lot of different ways I could go. But once when I read the Understanding Comics required reading from Scott McCloud, I really gravitated towards wanting to base a project off comic books and how to explore them. The reasons why I chose this was due to two main reasons. One, I have a real fascination with comics, and two, due to the popularity of Marvel, I thought this was a very topical thing to explore. The first reason why I chose to do this project has to do with my fascination for comics. Growing up, I read comic books with my dad, and I always loved Captain America. Thereby, I wanted to explore how to better understand some of his comic strips. Secondly, or the second reason I wanted to do this project was due to the recent popularity of Marvel. I think people are really starting to embrace comics and superheroes again. To continue on to my next slide, required text used to explore these comics. The first required text I used for my project was Postmortem, Every Frame of Painting. I use this text because it really dives deep into how authors and other people create these multimodal projects. The idea that I really dived deep into and explored was their idea 12 that no one can cheat the triangle, which is shown in the slide. This text talked a lot about how your project can either be good, fast, or cheap, thus the three things that make up the triangle, but it can't be all three of those things. Thereby, you need to choose what two parts of the triangle your work will represent. So, just to explain that a little more, your work can either be good and cheap, but it can't be fast. It can be good and fast, but can't be cheap, or fast and cheap, but not good. I'll explore this idea in the comic strips that I used. To move on to the second required text that I used for my project was Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics. The main idea that he used from his writings to understand comics was the different ways in which words and photos come together in comics. In his piece, he more or less summed up that there are unlimited possibility for how words and drawings can be combined in comics, and that they either work hand in hand with one another or they convey different ideas. The thing that I found most interesting about about his ideas, that you can use these different ways or interact words and photos in different ways, a million different ways inside comics. And that's what my project kind of aims to show, is that even though I'm looking at the same project, for each different panel or each different strip, words and photos are going to interact in different ways. So now to kind of move on to what I put together here and in my work for this project. So this is the comic strip one. The first comic. So this was the first comic strip that I looked at, and it's just, to put simply, it's just a comic strip of Captain America fighting Hitler. So to apply this to Scott McCloud's Understanding Comics, the idea that the words and the pictures that are being represented in this comics are duo-specific, meaning that the words and comics are both sending the same message. So you see by those red circles, you see Captain America is punching Hitler, and then in the same frame, it clearly says, or the other circle says, smashing through Captain America came face to face with Hitler. So you see that the word, so he's physically punching them, and then they're using the word smashing, so they're duo specific. And the same, now to apply this to my other required text, Postmortem, Every Frame of Painting. In this, you can, what I got from this is that you can kind of convey that this is both good and cheap. It's cheap in the sense that this is a comic, you can just draw it out. And it's good because look at how many different references they make to the times. They got the Nazis, they got Hitler, they got the United States flag. So it just really shows a lot of really shows a lot of things going on at the time. So that's why it would be cheap and good, but it wouldn't be fast because drawing every frame takes a while, and thinking of all these references take a very long time. To move on to my next comic, the second strip that I want to analyze, just give you an overview, is when Bucky Brooks finds out that Steve Rogers is Captain America. To apply this comic to, again, Scott McCloud's work, per my red boxes, this comic uses independent text. So independent text is basically when the photo and the text represent different things. So as you can see with my red boxes, if you just had these photos and with no words attached to them, you would really have no idea what's going on. But the text kind of illustrates really, again, what's happening in these comic strips. I think that this is really important. I think that this is really cool because it shows, comparing this to the last comic, it really shows a different way of how words and photos interact, and it really reinforces that idea that McCloud's stating that there's an unlimited way that words and pictures can interact in comics. Again, just to apply this to the triangle again, I think that this is good and cheap because again, you're drawing out just comic frames. But again, this would not be fast because right you got 5 different frames on this photo, 6 different frames, and the individual level of detail would take such a long time to produce. To move on here, the final comic strip that I want to analyze again is Captain America in a fight scene. To apply this to Scott McCloud's work on how to understand comics, this uses picture-specific words. So basically meaning that the words that are used are more or less a soundtrack for the comic. You can see that again through my red boxes here. Captain America looks like he's smashing through some machines, and they have the words Buke and Patow, I guess. And that's just basically making a sound effects. So again, I think what's really cool here is that we analyzed 3 different comics. They use words in the pictures in 3 different ways, but it's all still the same comic, and it's still all from the same comic book overall. So this is just 3 different examples, and each one is different. So now to move on to the final thing here in conclusion. This project shows how even with the same comic and text, there are different drawings for the author uses different ways to get his point across. This is important to note because it shows us the level of difficulty of writing comic and that not every frame, everything is the same. Furthermore, this comic is important because it shows us the meaning behind the triangle. As stated before, these works were both cheap and good, but they were not fast. Finally, here's my works cited for the comics. Thank you so much.